y pasamos de una tacada.
In one fell swoop, we move on to action in the world. Dear students, we will now begin to outline economic laws. We'll start with the most basic ones, the simplest ones. We're going to start with the law of marginal utility. To study this law, we'll imagine an action, but one that does not require the involvement of more than one human being. At this point, we're just going to consider the action of one lone human being, one sole actor, Robinson Crusoe, when he arrives on his island and hasn't yet come into contact with Friday. We'll begin with the simplest actions, and then gradually build our edifice, and add degrees of complexity to the analysis. Then, a few classes from now, we'll bring in society. However, to understand the functioning of the complex process of human action, in which many people participate, we must first have a good understanding of individual human action. We're going to start with the law of marginal utility. The law of marginal utility is the law that explains how the value of economic goods is determined, specifically the value of first-order economic goods, that is, goods that satisfy human needs, consumer goods and services. We'll begin with a series of essential ideas. The first of these ideas is obvious, but I want it to be quite clear. Since means are scarce, and therefore insufficient to achieve all the ends we set for ourselves, we start by using those scarce means to try to satisfy our most urgent needs, the ends we value most, and then we use the remaining means to satisfy relatively less urgent needs, ends we value less. When human beings act, we either explicitly, or in most cases, tacitly or implicitly build a value scale by which we organize our ends in terms of the value we attach to each in the context of the specific circumstances of time and place in which we're acting. We identify our most important end, our second most important end, and so on. What I'm saying is that because means are scarce, we begin by using them to accomplish the end we value most, and then we apply them to ends we value less. This is an ontological law, for nobody is going to use the scarce means within his reach to achieve ends he values little, while he consciously neglects others he values more. In fact, if anyone claims to be doing such a thing, she's lying, because it is precisely through action that we show what we value. When I act and I summon up the means to achieve an end, I am revealing precisely that the end I most value is the one I am pursuing. This idea is obvious enough. I don't think we need to discuss it further. Now for the second idea that is essential for understanding the law of marginal utility. When we consider the utility of the means, we limit ourselves to what we will call the relevant unit. If you recall, we defined value as the more or less psychically intense appreciation the actor assigns to his end, and we defined utility as the more or less psychically intense appreciation the actor assigns to the means. In fact, the value we place on the means depends precisely on the value we place on the end we think those means can enable us to accomplish. The law of marginal utility tells us how the value of the means is determined, and that's what I'm explaining now. We first made the obvious statement that we initially use scarce means to achieve the ends we value most, and then we apply what remains to ends we value less. And now we're introducing a second concept, which is as follows. When the actor takes utility into account in connection with a specific action, he or she considers only the utility of the relevant unit, the unit of means that is relevant in the context of that action. Therefore, as we discuss the law of marginal utility, we will see that the relevant unit will vary depending on the context of the action we are involved in. For example, take the thirsty cartoon character Forges draws. One of the most typical characters Forges portrays is a man in rags, who for some reason is lying sprawled on the desert sand, dying of thirst. He's dreadfully thirsty, and he's about to expire. The only thing that can save him from dying of dehydration is a glass of water to drink. And then, as if by magic, he miraculously spots 5 glasses of water behind a sand dune. I ask you, in the context of this action, in which the poor thirsty man finds himself in the middle of the desert, would a ton of water be the relevant unit? No. The relevant unit will be 1 glass more or 1 glass less, etc. But now, let's focus on a totally different action. Let's say Andalusia is in a period of drought. It's a very severe drought. All the land is dry, etc. The livestock is dying, and the harvest is disappearing. There's no choice but to buy water, and the owners of many country estates buy truckloads of water. They make a phone call. How much is a truckload of water today? A truckload of 10 tons of water is 100 euros. Okay, listen. Please bring me 3 truckloads tomorrow, because I need to refill the well, and people make their calculations. Man, 3 truckloads. I wonder how long they'll last us. Hey, don't turn the showers on too hard. People make their estimates, and there's a market. Tank trucks are driven to neighboring provinces where there's water. The trucks are filled up, and then they're taken to other areas. In the context of that action, what is the relevant unit? The 10-ton truckload of water, not the glass. The specific relevant unit depends on the context of each concrete action. And as we discuss the law of marginal utility, and you apply it, it is very important that you determine what unit is relevant in the context of each action.